A bombshell report is rocking the little people, big world community to its core. And what we have uncovered is a story of corporate intrigue, alleged family betrayal, and a high stakes courtroom battle that could change the future of Roloff Farms forever. We are talking about a secret plot, a hostile takeover, and a lawsuit so explosive it makes the family's on screen squabbles look like child's play. Sources close to the situation have leaked stunning details of a legal showdown pitting Amy Roloff against Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler in a fight for the very soul of the farm. The centerpiece of this conflict, a shocking $4 million lawsuit and a dramatic courtroom scene where Amy's lawyer reportedly left Caryn Chandler utterly destroyed on the witness stand. This isn't just about a farm anymore. It's about justice, legacy, and a scheme designed to squeeze Amy out for good. Before we dive into the explosive details of the alleged conspiracy, the backroom deals, and the courtroom testimony that sources say left the entire gallery gasping, I need you to do one thing. If you want to stay on top of the most in-depth and exclusive updates on the Roloff family, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, turn on notifications, and give this video a like. You are not going to want to miss a single second of what we are about to reveal. This is the story that's been bubbling just beneath the surface, and LPW Update is bringing it directly to you. All right, let's get right into the heart of this. To understand the gravity of this lawsuit, we have to rewind the clock a bit. For years, viewers have watched the slow, painful dissolution of Matt and Amy's partnership in Roloff Farms. We saw the arguments, the tension over the buyout of the north side of the property, and the ultimate sale. But what we didn't see, what was happening behind the cameras, is the subject of this entire legal firestorm. According to insider reports, the battle wasn't over when Amy sold her half of the land. In fact, that was just the beginning. Amy, as a co-founder, still retained a significant stake in the business entity itself, the Roloff Farms LLC. This entity is more than just land and barns. It's the brand, the intellectual property, the goodwill built over decades of television fame, and the highly profitable pumpkin patch season. It's a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and Amy still owned a piece of that lucrative pie. This, according to our sources, became a major point of contention for Matt and Caryn. They allegedly saw Amy's remaining shares as a persistent obstacle to their complete control. They wanted a clean slate, a new era for the farm that was solely theirs, with Caryn installed not just as Matt's partner, but as a central figure in the business operations. The problem was Amy's lingering ownership. It was a constant reminder of the past and a legal tie that they desperately wanted to sever. But they knew Amy understood the value of her shares and wouldn't sell them for a song. So a new strategy was allegedly devised, a plan that was far more aggressive and, as Amy's lawsuit would later claim, patently illegal. This is where the story takes a dark turn into the world of corporate law. Legal documents, which have been described to us by sources with access to the case file, show that Matt, with heavy influence and direct participation from Caryn, formed a brand new parent corporation. This entity was called Roloff Holdings Incorporated. The purpose of this new corporation was simple and ruthless: to become the sole owner of all Roloff Farms assets. The plan, as outlined in the lawsuit, was to transfer all the valuable assets from the original Roloff Farms LLC into the new Roloff Holdings Inc. This would effectively gut the old company, leaving it as an empty shell. Once that was done, they would have the leverage they needed to force Amy out. With their new corporate structure in place, Matt and Caryn made their move. They approached Amy with an offer to buy out her remaining shares in the original LLC. The price they offered was, according to the lawsuit, a shocking $500,000. To anyone who has followed the success of Roloff Farms, that number is jaw-droppingly low. The annual revenue from pumpkin season alone is reported to be in the millions, not to mention the value of the brand name, the merchandise, and the media licensing. Offering $500,000 for a foundational stake in that empire was, as Amy's lawyers would later argue, a deliberate and insulting lowball offer designed to be rejected. And Amy, as expected, refused. She knew her stake was worth exponentially more. She had poured 30 years of her life into building that business, from working the pumpkin patch to managing the books. She wasn't going to be pushed aside and have her legacy bought for pennies on the dollar. But her refusal was exactly what Matt and Caryn were allegedly counting on. Her no triggered the final, most aggressive phase of their plan, the hostile squeeze-out merger. Now, a squeeze-out merger is a complex legal tactic, but let's break it down. It's a move that majority shareholders can sometimes use to forcibly buy the shares of minority shareholders. Essentially, the new corporation, Roloff Holdings, Inc., which Matt and Caryn controlled, would initiate a merger with the old Roloff Farms, LLC. As part of the merger terms, they would force the cancellation of Amy's shares in the old company and pay her a cash value for them, the very same $500,000 she had just rejected. If she refused to accept the cash, it wouldn't matter. The merger would go through, the old company would be dissolved, and her shares would be legally extinguished. She would be left with a check she never wanted and would be completely severed from the business she co-founded. It was, as Amy's lawsuit frames it, a corporate execution. She was being erased from her own history. But Matt and Caryn made a critical miscalculation. They underestimated Amy. They saw her as an emotional ex-wife, not as a savvy businesswoman who would fight back with everything she had. When Amy was served with the official documents for the squeeze-out merger, she didn't just get angry, she got a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. She hired Ms. Albright, a woman described by legal insiders as one of Portland's most formidable corporate litigators, known for her sharp mind and a relentless, no-nonsense courtroom style. Amy's counterattack was swift and powerful. She filed a massive lawsuit against Matt, Caryn, and their new corporation, Roloff Holdings, Inc. The charges were severe: breach of fiduciary duty, minority shareholder oppression, and constructive fraud. The lawsuit alleged that Matt and Caryn, as the managing partners of the original LLC, had a legal duty to act in Amy's best interest, not to conspire against her. It claimed they had deliberately undervalued the company and abused their power to enrich themselves at her expense. And Amy wasn't asking for the $500,000 they had offered. She was demanding the true appraised value of her shares, which her own team of forensic accountants and business valuators had calculated to be a staggering $4 million. The filing of this lawsuit sent shockwaves through the family's inner circle. This was no longer a family disagreement to be aired out on television. This was a full-blown civil trial with depositions, discovery, and the potential for everything to be laid bare in a court of law. Matt and Caryn, who likely believed their corporate maneuver was airtight, were now facing a legal battle that threatened to not only expose their tactics, but also potentially bankrupt their new venture before it even got off the ground. The pretrial discovery phase, according to our sources, was a treasure trove for Amy's legal team. They subpoenaed emails, text messages, and financial records. And what they reportedly found was a paper trail that laid out the entire scheme. The most damning evidence, the linchpin of Amy's entire case, revolved around the company's valuation. Amy's lawyers discovered that in the process of setting up Roloff Holdings, Inc., Matt and Caryn had been required by their bank to get professional appraisals of the business's total value. The bank, in order to finance the new corporation, commissioned not one, not two, but 3 independent certified business appraisals. These appraisals, which Matt and Caryn allegedly kept hidden from Amy, were explosive. They took everything into account: the cash flow from pumpkin season, the value of the Little People, Big World brand, the tourism draw, the merchandising contracts, and the future earning potential. The results were consistent. All three independent firms valued the total business between $10 and $12 million, putting Amy's minority stake squarely in the $4 million range she was suing for. This was the smoking gun. It proved that Matt and Caryn were fully aware of the company's true worth. So where did their $500,000 offer come from? This is where Caryn Chandler's role becomes central to the entire case. The lawsuit alleges that Caryn, in her capacity as the acting farm manager, took it upon herself to procure a fourth appraisal. This one was not from a major independent firm. It was from a small local company called West Coast Valuations. And this appraisal was wildly different from the others. It completely ignored the brand value, the media rights, and the tourism goodwill. It valued Roloff Farms as if it were just a simple, non-public agricultural operation, a plot of farmland with some buildings on it. And based on that deeply flawed methodology, it arrived at a total company valuation of just over $1 million, which conveniently put Amy's share value right in the $500,000 ballpark. The lawsuit alleged this appraisal was a sham, commissioned for the sole purpose of creating a fraudulent, lowball number to justify the squeeze-out. The case finally went to trial. The atmosphere in the courtroom was described as incredibly tense. On one side sat Matt and Caryn, looking confident, flanked by their high-priced corporate lawyers. They were reportedly convinced this was a simple business dispute and that their corporate filings were legally sound. On the other side sat Amy, with her son Chris by her side for support, looking nervous but resolute. Her lawyer, Miss Albright, was a picture of calm, deadly focus. The trial unfolded over several days. Financial experts testified about the farm's immense profitability. Witnesses were called who spoke to the power of the LPBW brand. Amy's team methodically built their case, brick by brick, showing the jury that Roloff Farms was a media powerhouse, not just a patch of dirt. But everyone in that courtroom knew the entire case would hinge on one pivotal moment: the cross-examination of Caryn Chandler. She had positioned herself as the business manager, the one streamlining operations. Amy's lawyers were about to argue that she wasn't streamlining the business. She was orchestrating a fraudulent takeover. When Caryn took the stand, she initially appeared composed, even cheerful, as she answered her own lawyer's questions. She portrayed herself as a dedicated manager, working tirelessly on Matt's behalf to secure the farm's future and make it more efficient. She painted the formation of Roloff Holdings, Inc. as a standard and necessary business upgrade. She seemed to believe she had everything under control. Then it was Miss Albright's turn. Amy's lawyer approached the witness stand, her demeanor changing from quiet observation to that of a predator closing in. Her first questions were simple, designed to establish basic facts and lull Caryn into a false sense of security. Miss Chandler, you have been in a romantic relationship with Mr. Roloff for several years, correct? Caryn smiled. Nah. Yes, that's right. And during the period in question, you were also acting as the manager of Roloff Farms, LLC, weren't you? Yes, Caryn said proudly. I was helping Matt streamline the business. Streamline? Miss Albright repeated, letting the word hang in the air. An interesting choice of words. Miss Chandler, you were the acting manager of Roloff Farms, LLC, when the decision was made to form this new corporation, Roloff Holdings Incorporated, correct? Caryn nodded. Yes, I was. And you were intimately involved in the process of transferring the assets from the old company to the new one. I was involved, yes. It was a lot of work. Ms. Albright gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I'm sure it was. Let's talk about that work. You testified that you wanted to streamline the business. Would it be more accurate to say you wanted to eliminate a partner? Caryn's smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do, Miss Albright said, her voice turning sharp as steel. She walked over to the evidence table and picked up a bound document. She placed it directly in front of Caryn. Did you or did you not commission this appraisal from a company called West Coast Valuations? Caryn looked at the document, a flash of recognition in her eyes. Yes, that was to get a fair market price for the buyout. A fair market price, Miss Albright echoed, her voice laced with disbelief. This appraisal valued the entirety of the Roloff Farms brand and business at just over $1 million. Is that your understanding? It's what the professional appraiser determined, Caryn said, her voice becoming defensive. A professional, Miss Albright said, turning to face the jury. Let's talk about this particular professional. Miss Chandler, isn't it true that West Coast Valuations is a company owned and operated by a Mr. David Peters? Caryn hesitated. I believe that's his name, yes. Ms. Albright took a slow step closer to the witness box. And isn't it also true, Ms. Chandler, that David Peters is your brother-in-law? A gasp went through the courtroom. The jury members straightened in their seats, their eyes wide. Caryn's face went pale, then flushed a deep red. She was visibly flustered. He is a respected professional in his field, she stammered, her composure shattering. A respected professional? Miss Albright's voice rose, filled with righteous indignation. A professional who valued a multi-million-dollar international media brand and a premier Oregon tourist attraction as if it were a simple plot of farmland with zero goodwill. A professional who happens to be a member of your own family, whose appraisal just so happened to provide the exact justification you needed for your predatory $500,000 offer. Caryn was speechless, looking desperately toward her lawyer, who could do nothing but sit and watch. But Miss Albright wasn't finished. She went back to the evidence table and retrieved 3 more, much thicker bound documents. She walked back to the witness stand and dropped them on the ledge in front of Caryn, one by one, the thud of each one echoing in the silent courtroom. These, Miss Chandler, are the 3 other appraisals, the ones commissioned by the bank. This one from Deloitte values the company at $11.2 million. This one from KPMG puts the value at $10.5 million. And this one from a top Oregon valuation firm says it's worth $12 million. You were the sole negotiator in this squeeze out. You were the acting manager. Isn't it true that you had these appraisals in your possession and you never once presented them to Amy Roloff? You never even told her they existed, did you? Caryn looked at the pile of documents as if they were venomous snakes. Her eyes darted around the room, unable to meet anyone's gaze. I was acting on Matt's behalf, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I was trying to get the best deal for the new company. Miss Albright leaned in, her voice dropping to a low, menacing growl. The best deal? Or a fraudulent one? Do you want this jury to believe it's a coincidence that the only appraisal you showed your partner was the one from your brother-in-law, which was 10 times lower than all the others? You intentionally hid the real appraisals. You used a biased, sham valuation from a family member to try and cheat your partner out of millions of dollars. You did this to erase her from the company she built so you and Mr. Roloff could have it all to yourselves. That's not business, Miss Chandler. That's a conspiracy. She turned sharply on her heel and faced the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The courtroom was in stunned silence. Caryn Chandler sat on the witness stand, completely exposed and humiliated. Her testimony was in ruins. She had walked into the courtroom a confident business manager and was leaving it looking like a co-conspirator in a fraud scheme. In that single, devastating cross-examination, Amy Roloff's lawyer had not just won the battle. She had, for all intents and purposes, won the war. The jury's faces told the whole story. They were looking at Caryn with expressions of pure contempt. Matt Roloff, sitting at the defendant's table, was ashen-faced, reportedly staring at Caryn as if seeing her for the first time, the architect of a disaster that was now unfolding in real time. The defense tried to recover. Matt took the stand next, attempting to do damage control. He tried to frame the whole situation as a misunderstanding, a simple business negotiation where they had offered a starting price. He claimed he wasn't deeply involved in the details of the appraisals, that he had trusted Caryn to handle it. He tried to play the role of the big picture visionary, too busy with his projects to be bogged down by paperwork. But Miss Albright dismantled his testimony just as brutally. "Mr. Roloff," she began, "are you asking this court to believe one of two things? Either you were a willing and active participant in a conspiracy to defraud your ex-wife and business partner of 30 years, or you are so incompetent as a businessman that you allowed your girlfriend to orchestrate a multi-million-dollar corporate merger, using her brother-in-law for a fraudulent valuation without your knowledge or oversight. So which is it, Mr. Roloff? Are you a crook or are you a fool?" Matt had no good answer. Any path he took led to ruin. He mumbled something about trusting his team, but the damage was done. The jury saw the narrative clearly. A coordinated, malicious effort by Matt and Caryn to steal Amy's legacy. The closing arguments were a formality. Ms. Albright delivered a powerful, emotional summary, painting a picture of Amy as the founding mother of the Roloff Farms empire, a woman who had poured her life's work into the soil of that farm, only to be cast aside and cheated by the two people she should have been able to trust the most. The defense's closing argument was weak and technical, a desperate attempt to argue that they had followed the letter of corporate law, even if the spirit was rotten to the core. After the closing arguments, the jury was sent to deliberate, but they didn't need much time. Reports from inside the courthouse said the deliberation was one of the shortest in the court's recent history for a civil case of this magnitude. Within just a few hours, they had reached a verdict. When the jury filed back into the courtroom, the tension was unbearable. Amy was seen holding Chris's hand, her eyes closed in prayer. Matt and Caryn sat stiffly, staring straight ahead. The foreman handed the verdict to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. The judge read the document, his face impassive at first, then breaking into a deep frown of disapproval as he scanned the findings. He looked up, not at the jury, but directly at Matt and Caryn. What happened next was more than just a legal ruling. It was a complete and total vindication for Amy Roloff. The judge began to speak, his voice booming through the silent courtroom. "Before I read the jury's verdict, which I fully endorse, this court feels compelled to comment on the facts presented in this case." He paused, taking a long look at the defendants. "I have presided over many business disputes. I have seen disagreements, tough negotiations, and partners who have had bitter falling outs, but rarely in my 20 years on this bench have I seen such a blatant and calculated act of bad faith." He let the words sink in. This was not a business negotiation. It was a predatory and unlawful attempt to defraud a founding partner. The defendants, Mr. Roloff and Ms. Chandler, created a new corporate entity not for legitimate business purposes, but as a weapon to dispossess Ms. Roloff of her rightful equity. They engaged in what the law calls constructive fraud, intentionally hiding credible multi-million-dollar appraisals while knowingly putting forth a sham valuation from a conflicted and biased source, a family member, for the sole purpose of justifying a lowball, forcible buyout. The sheer brazenness of this scheme is, frankly, stunning. The judge then turned his attention to Amy. Ms. Roloff was a minority shareholder, and the law provides special protections for those in her position against oppression by the majority. What happened here is a textbook case of minority shareholder oppression. It is egregious, it is malicious, and it will not stand in this court. He picked up the verdict form. On the matter of the lawsuit, This court finds entirely in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Amy Roloff. A wave of emotion washed over Amy as she broke down in tears of relief. The judge wasn't finished. The hostile merger is hereby dissolved. It is ruled that the defendants, Mr. Roloff and Ms. Chandler, acted with malicious intent. Therefore, this court orders Roloff Holdings Incorporated to pay Ms. Roloff the full appraised value of her shares, which this court accepts as $4 million. But the hammer was yet to fall. The judge continued, his voice stern and unwavering. Furthermore, due to the egregious nature of the fraud and the finding of malicious intent, this court believes that simple compensation is not enough. A message must be sent. I am therefore awarding Ms. Roloff an additional $1 million in punitive damages to be paid personally by Mr. Matt Roloff and Ms. Caryn Chandler. The final judgment was a knockout blow, $5 million in total. Amy Roloff walked away not just with her full $4 million, but with an extra $1 million to punish Matt and Caryn for their deception. The aftermath was immediate and devastating for the new Roloff Holdings, Inc. In order to pay the $5 million judgment, Matt and Caryn were forced to take on massive debt. They had to mortgage the entire farm to the hilt, leveraging every last bit of equity they had. Their grand plan to launch a new, streamlined, and profitable era for the farm was dead on arrival. The new corporation was financially crippled from the very start, buried under a mountain of debt incurred from their own failed scheme. Amy Roloff walked out of that courtroom a multimillionaire, vindicated and free. Matt and Caryn were left with a hollowed-out company and the bitter taste of a self-inflicted financial catastrophe. The hostile takeover had failed, and the queen had not only defended her castle, but had walked away with the king's treasure as well. This shocking turn of events marks a definitive and explosive end to the partnership that started it all, leaving the future of Roloff Farms hanging precariously in the balance. Let's delve into the seismic fallout from this explosive verdict, a shockwave that didn't just rattle the courtroom, but has fundamentally fractured the Roloff family and thrown the entire future of their iconic farm into question. What we've discussed so far is the what, the plot, the trial, the verdict. Now, we're going to explore the so what. Based on reports from sources deep inside the Roloff circle, the aftermath of this $5 million judgment has been a catastrophic spiral of financial ruin, personal betrayal, and a family civil war fought not in a courtroom, but in stony silences and slammed doors. Imagine the scene immediately after the judge's gavel fell. On one side of the aisle, Amy Roloff, weeping into the shoulder of her husband, Chris Marek. These weren't tears of joy, sources say, but tears of profound, gut-wrenching relief and vindication. For years, she had felt marginalized, pushed out, and disrespected in the business she co-created. This verdict wasn't just about the money. It was a court of law affirming her value and condemning the actions of the two people who had tried to erase her. A source close to Amy described her feelings that day. She felt like she could finally breathe. It was as if a 30-year weight of being made to feel less than in the business had been lifted. The money was secondary to the judge looking Matt and Caryn in the eye and calling their actions what they were, a malicious fraud. Her celebration that evening was said to be quiet and private, shared with Chris and her children, who were reportedly all firmly in her corner. Now, picture the other side of that courtroom. Matt Roloff and Caryn Chandler, sitting frozen in place, the judge's words hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. The $1 million punitive damages ordered to be paid personally was the ultimate humiliation. It was a legal declaration that their actions were not just a business misstep, but morally and ethically corrupt. Witnesses in the courtroom described a chilling silence between them as they exited. There were no comforting words, no supportive glances. Matt, known for his talkative, problem-solving demeanor, was reportedly ashen-faced and utterly silent. Caryn, who had been so confident on the stand before her cross-examination, looked completely defeated. The car ride back to the farm was described by an insider as an hour of the loudest silence you've ever heard. The finger pointing allegedly began almost immediately. Sources claim Matt was furious, not just at the verdict, but at the sheer sloppiness of the plan. He had put his trust in Caryn's business acumen, and her strategy had blown up in their faces in the most public and expensive way imaginable. The decision to use her own brother-in-law for the appraisal was a catastrophic, amateurish mistake that a sharp lawyer like Ms. Albright had exploited to perfection. The question that reportedly echoed through the farmhouse in the days that followed was, how could you be so stupid? Matt, the self-styled business visionary, had been made to look like a fool, and he allegedly placed the blame for that squarely at Caryn's feet. Caryn, in turn, felt utterly thrown under the bus. Our sources suggest she felt she was only doing what Matt wanted, to get Amy out of the picture for as little money as possible. She was acting on Matt's behalf, as she had testified, and when the plan went sideways, she was the one left exposed and humiliated on the witness stand while Matt watched. This lawsuit and its disastrous conclusion reportedly created a deep and lasting fracture in their relationship, replacing their once united front with an undercurrent of resentment and blame. They had won control of the farm, but they had lost the war, and now they were chained together by a $5 million debt. Let's talk about that debt, because the financial consequences are staggering and provide a crucial hidden context for everything viewers have seen on the show in recent years. A $5 million judgment isn't something you just write a check for, not even for the Roloffs. To satisfy the court's order, Matt and Caryn had no choice but to take Roloff Holdings Inc. to the bank and secure a massive loan. This meant leveraging the farm to its absolute limit. Every acre, every building, the famous pirate ship, the western town, everything was signed over as collateral. They essentially had to mortgage their dream to pay for their scheme. This has had a crippling effect on the farm's operations. Think about it. A huge portion of the farm's annual income, especially the massive profits from pumpkin season, no longer goes toward investment, new attractions, or savings. Instead, it goes directly to the bank to service this colossal debt. It explains so much. It explains the desperate, almost frantic attempts to sell the north side of the property, including the big house. That wasn't just Matt wanting to downsize. According to our analysis, it was a desperate need for a massive cash infusion to pay down the debt and free up some capital. When that sale failed, the financial pressure on them would have intensified tenfold. This theory also sheds light on the strained negotiations with their own children. When Jeremy and Zach expressed interest in buying a portion of the farm, Matt was no longer negotiating from a position of strength or family legacy. He was negotiating as a man buried in debt. He couldn't afford to give his sons a family discount. He needed top dollar for every square foot of land to appease the bank. The prices he was quoting, which seemed so outrageous to the boys and to the viewers, make perfect sense when you view them through the lens of this secret $5 million judgment. He wasn't selling a legacy. He was trying to liquidate an asset to cover a massive liability. His dream of the farm, passing to the next generation of Roloffs, was likely sacrificed the moment he and Caryn decided to try and cheat the first generation. The family fracture goes far deeper than just business deals. This lawsuit was a loyalty test, and the results have been devastating. For Zach and Tori, this was reportedly the point of no return. A source close to the couple said that Zach saw the lawsuit as a direct, malicious attack on his mother. He was allegedly disgusted by his father's willingness to partner with Caryn to try and financially ruin Amy. It wasn't about business, it was about character. Their subsequent estrangement from Matt and Caryn and their eventual move to Washington can be seen as a direct consequence of this event. They weren't just moving for a bigger house, they were moving to put an entire state between themselves in a situation they found toxic and unforgivable. They chose a side, and it was unequivocally Team Amy. Jeremy and Audrey's situation is more complex, but insiders suggest the lawsuit was a major eye-opener for them as well. They had their own dreams for a piece of Roloff Farms, a dream of building a life there. But when the details of the lawsuit came to light within the family, they allegedly saw a side of their father they hadn't seen before. They saw a man willing to use ruthless corporate tactics against his own family. How could they ever enter into a business deal with him and trust that he would treat them fairly? The failed negotiations to buy the farm weren't just about price, they were about a fundamental breakdown of trust. The lawsuit proved to them that for Matt, when it came to business, not even family was off limits. This brings us back to Caryn Chandler. Before this lawsuit, she had successfully positioned herself as the indispensable partner, the business-savvy manager who was helping Matt realize the farm's full potential. But the trial ripped that image to shreds. She was exposed not as a business genius, but as the architect of a failed conspiracy who made a rookie mistake by involving her own family. Within the family structure, her credibility was destroyed. For the kids, she would forever be the woman who tried to cheat their mother. Her dream of becoming the new matriarch of the Roloff dynasty, presiding over a happy, blended family on the farm, was now a fantasy. Instead, she became a central figure in the family's implosion, the symbol of the division that had torn them all apart. The long-term future of Roloff Farms itself is now on incredibly shaky ground. A business saddled with that much debt is in a precarious position. One or two bad pumpkin seasons, a dip in tourism, or any unexpected major expense could be enough to push them to the brink of insolvency. The farm that was once a symbol of family and whimsical creativity is now, according to this analysis, a debt-ridden asset teetering on a knife's edge. The pressure on Matt to generate revenue is immense. Every single decision must be filtered through the lens of paying the bank. This could explain why we see more and more paid attractions, higher prices, and a more corporate feel to the farm in recent years. The fun family project has become a desperate struggle for financial survival. And what about Amy? She walked away with $5 million, free and clear. She has her new life with Chris, financial security, and the moral high ground. She is, in many ways, the undisputed winner of this entire saga. But sources say the victory is bittersweet. She won the battle, but she lost her family as she knew it. The farm she poured her life into is now a place of painful memories, controlled by the people who tried to betray her, and her children are estranged from their father. She never wanted this war, but she was forced to fight it, and she has to live with the collateral damage, even from the winning side. The great irony here is that in their ruthless attempt to seize total control and build a new future for Roloff Farms, Matt and Caryn may have signed its death warrant. Their greed and deception led to a judgment that has financially crippled the very empire they were trying to conquer. They wanted to squeeze Amy out, but they ended up squeezing the life out of their own business. The legacy of Roloff Farms is now permanently tainted. It's no longer just a story about a little family with big dreams. It's a cautionary tale about how greed, betrayal, and a hostile takeover can burn a 30-year legacy to the ground. The big house sits empty, the kids are gone, and a mountain of debt looms over the pumpkin patch. And it all traces back to a secret courtroom showdown, a devastating cross-examination, and a judge's verdict that finally brought the truth to light. The question that hangs over everything now is not who will inherit the farm, but whether there will be anything left to inherit at all.